I now recognize Ms. Tokuda from Hawaii for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During the pandemic, medical countermeasures like diagnostics, vaccines, and therapeutics were essential for responding to COVID-19 and saving lives. Research and investment into developing these medical countermeasures, even before COVID-19 hit our shores, quite frankly, gave our public health workers the critical tools they needed to keep pace with the virus. So with that in mind, I'd like to discuss efforts by your agencies to lay the groundwork for rapid medical countermeasure development for if and when, quite frankly, the next pandemic strikes. Dr. Tabak or Walke, what kind of research are you folks doing, investing to prepare in the next generation of medical countermeasures for future novel viruses? And quite honestly, are we already behind the curve due to cuts and misinformation that were experienced during the previous administration? Are there concerns about public acceptance of these countermeasures when they need to be executed as a result of a lot of the disinformation that we've also seen?
Perhaps I'll start. So the first step is you have to identify the offending pathogen. And as you have to invest in representative viruses from 9 different viral families in order to cover the landscape of viruses that are circulating the globe. And once you do that and learn as much as possible about them and understand their lifestyle, you can begin to think about where you can intervene through so-called countermeasures. So that's a big part of what NIH does. We develop model systems so that potential countermeasures can be rapidly developed, and then of course we stand up clinical trial networks to ultimately see if there is efficacy of proposed countermeasures in humans. But let me turn it to my colleague now.
A couple of comments. CDC's role in medical countermeasure development is more on the back end after we actually have medical countermeasures through clinical trials, and then they're introduced to the public. We do a lot of work on vaccine effectiveness, real world vaccine effectiveness around the nation, and so we stood up those networks quickly to try to understand the effectiveness in various populations related to the vaccine, and we do similar work actually with other medical countermeasures.
No, very briefly, because I have limited time here. Knowing what we know now as a result of going through the COVID pandemic, do you feel that we are on track in terms of really understanding those potential offending pathogens and where we need to be when, quite frankly, that next pandemic could strike? Are we prepared to be able to execute with fidelity to the public that will be accepting of these countermeasures as well? Just a yes or no. If right now, are we prepared for what will come next given our current capacity?
We're better prepared.
We're more prepared than we were, absolutely.
Okay, so we're more prepared right now. I will tell you, I am very concerned, as Representative Garcia mentioned, that the incoming administration is already proposing to streamline NIH, including restructuring the agency's budget and bypassing its intensive peer review system, all critical to really create these countermeasures that we are talking about that will save lives. I'm very concerned that any attempt to overhaul our federal agencies in this matter will result in the loss of our best and brightest scientists and threaten the quality and integrity of our agencies' research and our ability to execute to a public that needs to hear from the very best and brightest in our country. Dr. Tabak, how important are sustained federal investments, not funding cuts, but sustained federal investments and public trust in science and scientists to your agency's work in preparing for future health threats? Just a brief response.
History has shown that the sustained investment in what's attract people to biomedical research and keeps them into the biomedical research workforce.
Thank you. And Dr. Marston, how might funding cuts coupled with anti-science and anti-vaccine sentiment affect FDA's work in responding to future health emergencies?
Well, I think that one of the things that we've seen through the course of the pandemic is how stretched that we were pulling from every corner of the FDA. Funding cuts will result in exacerbation of that.
Thank you. So honestly, we need quite a bit more resources and capacity to really combat what will ultimately be on the horizon for us. And while I've appreciated the forward-looking focus of this hearing, I must point out that the incoming administration poses a serious threat to undo all of the progress that our witnesses have discussed with us today. Under the false pretense of making America healthy again, President-elect Trump and RFK Jr. have committed to an extreme agenda that promises to hamstring our federal health agencies and their essential work to keep America Americans safe. We cannot let that happen, and I urge my House Republican colleagues who have spoken in favor of public health and pandemic readiness today to stand against the dangerous agenda and support critically needed investments, not cuts, in pandemic preparedness. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I yield back.